Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. Before we jump into our third segment, let me remind you guys, if you're interested in seeking an education in game design or some of the video production elements needed in esports, go ahead and check out Full Sail University. Go to www.fullsail.edu for more information on the programs in audio engineering, game design, 3D animation, all these cool different skill sets that are necessary to get yourself that career in the game design or esports production world. So go ahead, check it out. Again, www.fullsail.edu/MLG. So our third segment is going to be the third map between Snute and Alicia. We're talking about how Vipers are a pretty good unit. First, how to defend the early Zealot pressure effectively. Then, taking a third base Protoss first Zerg from Protoss perspective, a couple things to keep in mind. And also how to break a turning Protoss as Zerg, something a lot of Zergs have a very hard time doing. So we're jumping this game at the 6:30 mark. And we're going to talk about the Zerg point of view. Again, we can see Alicia doing the same build. He's doing that gateway expand. He's getting to Stargate after he gets 3 warp gates, but ideally he wants to do something with these 3 warp gates. So, if it's a Zerg player, ideally you don't let this pylon get up. Like that's the perfect thing for Zerg is kill the pylon, then Protoss just kind of cries and they can't really harass you too much until they get Stargate in the south. But if you can't get the pylon, if you can get a jump on those Zealots and take them out when their number is small. Remember last map I talked about how you wait to get somewhere between 6 and 9 Zealots, and all of a sudden, as long as you stay together, you'll be cost efficient against those speedlings. This game, we saw that Snute was able to catch it when there's 2 or 3 Zealots. When there's 2 or 3 speedlings, can surround them and take them out very cost efficiently, as long as you have 12, 14 speedlings or thereabouts enough to really handle a couple Zealots. And then if you kill the first 2 or 3, it takes much longer for them to get to 6. Most Protoss players are going to say, you know what, as long as he keeps tabs on me, it won't do too much damage. So instead, focus on warping units back at home to defend and build up enough gateway army to move out and take that third base. So that's exactly what we're going to see. As a Protoss player, when you want to take a third base, unless you're going to do this super fast third where you take it before your opponent has Zergian speed, if you're going to take like a mid-lead time third base, you're getting some air units, your Mothership Core is out harassing. You want to wait till about 5 to 6 gateway units. Once you have 5 to 6 gateway units, if they're mostly Sentry Zealots, you can go ahead and take that third. Just make sure to place your army in a position that as it moves out, it's near a wall or it's in between buildings. So if your opponent has a whole bunch of speedlings, this army is pretty safe, right? It only takes 1 force field here, 1 force field here, or you can even hit the force field right there, and it's going to be very safe from a mass speedlings. Yes, maybe he could right-click the Nexus and he could kill it, but then he'd be losing a whole bunch of speedlings, and you just restart it again. It's not that big a deal. So always keep these units in a safe spot. But the other very important thing is as you're putting most of your army to third base, make sure to put a single unit to wall in your natural, because the worst thing that can happen to you is a whole bunch of speedlings like this run by, and now it's like, what are you going to do, right? You have to send a Mothership Core back home, you can use Photon Overcharge, but you're still taking a decent amount of damage to speedlings in the natural as well, and he had to abandon his third, leave that open. Snute could have theoretically even had more speedlings denying that third base. He's barely able to save the main, which is very important. And he actually didn't lose that many probes, so it wasn't that bad. Alicia's not actually that far behind here, as long as he can defend his third base. But it could have been much worse, and if you're not insanely fast at reacting like Alicia, it would have been worse. And here losing his sentries isn't good either, because of course he wasn't in that nice spot where he can't be hit too much by force fields. But now we're going to talk about, okay, the Protoss player that Zerg has scouted, he sees, okay, support bait, Stargate, Robo. He's obviously going for a late game composition, Void Ray, Colossi, and then he's going to add in Templar like he's done the last 2 games to me. And on 3 bases, you know, he's going to have a good enough economy to get that great army out. As a Zerg player, I mean, you could just play the late game and do a late game, but maybe you say, okay, I feel like I'm a little bit ahead killing those sentries. I want to try to kill him. But it's very difficult to kill a Protoss player who's turning, right? They can hit force fields on the ramp, they have Photon Overcharge, they can make buildings walling off, they can put Colossi behind the buildings. Very, very difficult to go ahead and take them out. If you anticipate this might happen, do exactly what Snute did. Where you see this, the Hive's already done. This is 12:30 in the game, the Hive's going to finish before the 13-minute mark. Why is that true? Because if you go back to the 10-minute mark, we can see even while Snute was doing those run-bys, oops, with this Snute's point of view. Not quite working. If you overlook at Snute's point of view, we can see that as soon as he saw his third base going down, which you see with vision, he sees that it was probably being taken with his speeding over here. and then he can confirm it a little bit later. He's already getting that infestation pit, and as soon as the infestation pit is done, he's going to tech to hive very quickly as soon as he knows, okay, yes, I'm doing some damage, but I'm not going to cripple my opponent. I'm just being annoying here, and I'm not really going to be able to break him. Alicia's proven that he has good force fields. He has Photon Overcharge. He has Void Rays and Colossi. It's not easy to break an opponent as long as they defend the ramps very well. So I'm going straight to Hive. 11-minute mark, already starting that Hive tech. That's very important because what that means is now all of a sudden they're both going to play passive for a bit. We can fast forward to the next parts of the game. You can see as the Protoss gets this wall, it's very difficult to break with Roach Hydra. This can be easily force field as long as Alicia keeps an eye on it and controls that watchtower. He has Observer out there. And this space here, let me back this up just a hair. This space here is a very good defensive setup. Right, the Colossi are behind here. There's sentries to help out with force fields. But the key thing if you want to break this type of defense is in the Viper. If you tech to the Hive fast enough, also you can have this Viper attack. And if you think about identifying what are the key threats of the Protoss player as far as their defensive power goes, it actually comes down to a couple things. Force fields, you can't do too much about stopping them from putting out force fields. They're going to put down those force fields. Unless they have Ultradis, you can't squash them. But force fields are only good if they have damage so that once your units are stuck, they can go ahead and kill them. So the best way to approach dealing with the Protoss defense is taking out their damage potential. Damage potential with this army. Well, it's these Colossi guys right here. It's the Photon Overcharge and the 2 Photon Cannons, or actually 3 Photon Cannons. Photon Cannons and Photon Overcharge in addition to those Colossi. So if you look at those threats and you see how exactly Snoot's going to deal with that, it's going to be very simple. As he comes in here, the Colossi need to be abducted. And you just put a Blinding Cloud on the Nexus and the Photon Cannons. There goes the Colossi. Take those guys out first. Make sure they're dead because they're the biggest threat. The next biggest threat is the Cannons and the Photon Overcharge. So go ahead, once you deal with the Colossi, put the Blinding Cloud down here, and now look at this. This cannon, worthless, right? This planetary Photon Overcharge on the Nexus, its range is melee as well, so it's worthless. And now even, yes, the force fields are trapping your units, but who cares? There's nothing that can kill them, right? There's 4 Stalkers coming out. That's not going to be too annoying. In fact, to even approach you, you have to walk through the Blinding Cloud. And so nothing in that Protoss defense is being particularly effective just due to the power of the Viper. So very, very important to realize that if you want to break a Turling Protoss, there's 2 ways to do it, right? One is you throw about 300 roaches at him. And then maybe if you have 5 bases and a ton of economy, you can throw a max roach army at him and trade like horribly, and hopefully throw another max roach army. But that only works if you're way ahead in economy, or if your opponent isn't really microing your defense very well against at a very high level, or even at a not so high level. As long as they use the Photon Overcharge and keep their key units behind the buildings, it's going to be extremely difficult to break them with Roach Hydra. The other way is anticipate that situation might come and tech Hive much faster, saying, you know what, Infestation Pit and Hive, okay, that's 5 less Hydras in my army, or actually probably 4 less Hydras in my army, 5 or 6 less roaches. That's okay. I'm not going to die by having 6 less roaches. I'm still going to be fine. And then once I get the Hive and get a few Vipers out and do exactly what we saw here, extremely effective at taking out the defense. So as a Zerg player, focus on a couple things. Scout for those proxy pylons. If you can catch those proxy pylons, you'll be so much better off against early Protoss aggression. If you can't catch proxy pylon, try to catch a few Zealots as they move out and engage them in small numbers. As a Protoss player, when you take the 3rd base, make sure your Sentry Zealot force defending the 3rd stays up against a wall or up against a Nexus where they can't be surrounded easily. And also make sure to block those run-bys. Very important to make sure that as you're moving out, take your 3rd base, your natural is safe as well. And finally, as a Zerg player, if you want to break a Turling Terran or a Turling Protoss, or even some weird Zerg Resurge situations, a Zerg who's sitting with like Swarm Host behind Spines, Vipers are always your best unit. You can use Blinding Cloud on Planetary Fortresses, on Nexuses, Photon Cannons, basically anything with range. You can take out key units like Siege Tanks, Void Rays, or Colossi with Abduct. Extremely useful unit at breaking a defensively positioned opponent. So wraps up our 3rd segment of Rules of Engagement. We'll take a short break and be on to the Q&A.